Hello and welcome to a new type of episode of Bright on Buddhism called the Asian Religions series. In this series, we will be discussing religious traditions in Asia other than Buddhism. Buddhism has never existed in a vacuum, and as it has spread all across East Asia, it has developed, localized, and syncretized with local traditions in fascinating and significant ways. As such, we cannot provide a complete picture of East Asian Buddhism without discussing these local traditions such as they are and such as they were. It is important to note that these discussions of these religious traditions will be very introductory and basic, and will in no way paint a complete picture of these religious traditions as they existed in history or as they exist in the present day. We simply hope to discuss some of the religious, doctrinal, cultural, social, political environment that exists around Buddhism as it exists in India, China, Korea, and Japan. Today, we will be discussing Hinduism, a very historically and culturally significant religious tradition originating in India. We hope you enjoy. Hinduism is the third largest religion in the world by number of followers, and has been present in some form in the Indian subcontinent since at least 3000 BCE. It is often regarded as being the oldest religion in the world, but it has no founding figure, and as such, it has an incredibly varied history and has several iterations of beliefs, texts, and practices. The word Hinduism itself is a Western word originating from Britain's colonial activities in the Indian subcontinent, and as such, it has been applied as a blanket term to an incredibly diverse range of beliefs, practices, and texts which exist in the present and throughout history. The reason it was applied was not to describe what Hindu people are or what they do or what they believe, but rather to describe what they are not. They're not Muslims, they're not Sikhs, they're not Jains, and they're not Christians. We will discuss this issue in more depth when we get into the modern era portion of the history of Hinduism. Thus, it is better to think of Hinduism in terms of Hinduisms, or even to do away with the term Hinduism altogether, given the diverse manifestations that can be seen over time. Most of the time, scholars today assess the history of Hinduism in terms of periods of development, and these are broken up according to historical, textual, and doctrinal developments which mark a seminal change in the nature of Hinduism as it's practiced and believed in the Indian subcontinent. The first period we'll be discussing is the Vedic period, which lasted from about 1500 BCE to 500 BCE. It is so called because it corresponds to the authorship of the Vedas. These Vedic texts are a collection of oral histories, legends, myths, and speculations about the divine that were compiled and written down in Sanskrit, the holy language of ancient Hinduism. The word Veda roughly translates to secret or timeless revelation or knowledge. These Vedas fall under a category of texts known as Shruti, meaning that which is heard. This means that they have the characteristic of being apaurusaya, not coming from humans. This refers to the fact that the content of these texts is divine revelation, which has been quote-unquote heard by sages and handed down to mortals. As such, their content is mythological, ritual, and speculative about the nature of the world around us. There are four Vedas: the Rig Veda, which is the oldest of the four, the Atharva Veda, the Yajurveda, and the Samaveda. These texts contain the earliest pantheon of Hindu gods, known as Devas. These devas are personifications of divine powers, and they fall under three distinct classes. These classes are celestial devas, associated with the sky, atmospheric devas, associated with the air around us, and terrestrial devas, associated with the earth. Some of the most well-known gods that can be found in the Vedas are Agni, the god of fire, Indra, the lightning warrior, and Soma, the god of a specific type of ritually significant plant. Agni is an earth god associated with heat and fire of many different kinds. Not only is he associated with actual flame and fire, but also this latent internal heat, such as that which is reflective of power and efficacy cultivated through ascetic practice and sacrifice. He plays a central role in sacrifice, which is one of the main rituals of Vedic Hinduism. He is said to purify and transport offerings made into a sacred flame to the sky and to the rest of the gods. He also transports the recently dead to the realm of King Yama, who we are familiar with from Buddhism. Indra should also be familiar in the context of Buddhism. In Buddhism, Indra is the lord of all devas and the ruler of the Triyatrimsa heaven. In Vedic Hinduism, he's a warrior god who models what the ideal warrior ought to be and what he ought to do. His stomach is said to be filled with soma, this ritual plant, and he has a rescuer, an atmosphere god, and a commander of lightning. Soma is the ritual plant which we've been mentioning. He's an earth god, and the drink that is made from the soma plant is said to give the drinker special ritual powers and freedom and even the ability to fly. The main form that rituals take during this Vedic period is sacrifice to the various gods, but also recitation of the Vedic texts in hymn form and performance of some of the stories of the Vedas. You'll remember that sacrifices are made to Agni, and he is simultaneously the actual flame in front of you, but also the element of fire. And as such, he's very important in the ritual setting as being an intermediary between the humans and the gods. The purpose of this Vedic tradition of ritual was to maintain the cosmic order as it ought to be. Human beings have a duty to make sacrifices and propitiations to the gods, and the gods have a responsibility to hold up their end as well. If either of them falters, the world is said to fall into disarray. As such, the gods and humans had a cooperative or collaborative relationship that relied on each party fulfilling their duties when it came to the maintenance of everything. This will be very important to remember as we progress through the rest of Hindu history and doctrine. One of the hymns of the Rig Veda is a creation story called the Purusha Sukta. Purusha is a character who is understood to be the cosmic body of the universe, but also is personified as this great man or cosmic man. In the story, his body is dismembered and becomes the four castes of Indian society. In the story, his mouth became the Brahmin class, which is the class of scholars and priests who fulfill ritual functions for the community. They speak with the mouth of the gods. His arms became the Kshatriyas, or the warriors. Arms are big and strong, and so the warriors should also be big and strong. His thighs became the Vaishyas, or the merchants and landowners, and they're the thighs because they hold up the entire community and the entire economy with their trade and commerce. The feet became the Shudras, or the slaves and peasants, because they were the lowliest and the dirtiest people. Outside of this body are the untouchables, otherwise known as outcasts, because they are literally outside of the caste system. These are people who are given the dirtiest jobs, such as street sweepers, latrine cleaners, etc. This system only allowed the top 3 castes to learn the Vedas and participate in rituals. The Shudras were prohibited from practice of the Vedas in any form. The top 3 castes, however, not only were allowed to, but were expected to learn the Vedas at some point in their lives. All the members of these top 3 castes are expected to follow a particular trajectory in their lives according to Dharma. We've talked about this word Dharma in the context of Buddhism very extensively, but we should note that it has a very different meaning and connotation in the Hindu context. In the Hindu context, Dharma is what one ought to do and why. It is the social and religious duty which is based on the maintenance of the structure of the universe and the caste system. That duty, that structure of the universe, and the social systems that stem from it are all Dharma in Hinduism. An individual's Dharma is determined by their social class and their stage of life, and their ability to fulfill it and how well they do that is all for the maintenance of the cosmic order. Depending on where someone is in their stage of life and what their social status is, their duty, what they ought to do, changes. We've already talked about the 4 castes, and now we should mention the 4 ashramas, or the 4 stages of life. From birth until 25, a person is a student, learning their role in life, learning their dharma according to their social class. Then, from 25 until 48, they are in the household stage of life, wherein they start families, practice their trade, and fulfill their role in the community. Thus, at the same time, they also educate their own children. From 48 to 72, they are in their retired life, where they hand over the household responsibilities to the next generation and gradually withdraw from the householder life. From 72 onward, they're in the renunciation period of their lives, where they turn their attention toward ascetic and ritual practices for the purpose of the purification of bad karma and the accrual of good karma, which leads to the achievement of moksha, or liberation from samsara. Moksha is when the Atman, or the eternal everlasting soul, realizes its unity with Brahman, which is understood to be the ultimate reality of which we are all a part. As you can see, several critical ideas in Buddhism, such as karma, dharma, samsara, and Atman, find their roots in Vedic Hinduism. As such, we'll talk about the dialogue between Buddhism and Hinduism when we get to the appropriate time period. For now, we'll move forward to the Puranic period of Hinduism, which lasted from 500 BCE to 500 CE, and coincided with the composition of 2 epics known as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, as well as the Puranas. It is in this period that devotion to the Trimurti, or the group of 3 gods known as Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu, came into more focus. We should note that during this time period, all castes had access to these texts, and as such, they became much more popular and determinative in Hindu religious practice. Brahma, as you may know, is known as the creator of all things, and he has a consort known as Sarasvati, and in imagery he's typically depicted with 4 heads, 4 hands, and 4 faces. Vishnu is the preserver, whose consort is Lakshmi, and he's responsible for overseeing the preservation of the cosmic order. He is known for having as many as 22 avatars. These avatars are manifestations which he can take when he comes into our world to set the cosmic order straight when it's been threatened. Some well-known ones include Narasimha, the half-man, half-lion, Rama, the main character of the Ramayana, Krishna, one of the characters in the Mahabharata, and even the Buddha. Hindu practitioners have argued that the Buddha himself is an avatar of Vishnu that has come into the world to set things right. Shiva is the destroyer, whose consort is Parvati, and he's regarded as being both very powerful in asceticism, yoga, and meditation, but also being highly erotic and wild. He constitutes a paradox of being an erotic ascetic. Stories of their lives and their functions are told in great detail in the Puranas, the Mahabharata, and the Ramayana, which are preserved oral histories, and around which many ritual sacrifices, recitations, and meditative practices are centered. You'll note that each of them has a role such as creator, preserver, or destroyer, and the reason for that is that in Hinduism, time is cyclical. As such, the universe goes through cycles where it's created, it's preserved, and then it's destroyed, and then recreated all over again so the cycle can continue. People show dedication to these deities either individually or as a group in what is known as puja. Puja is any devotional ritual prayer, offering, or sacrifice made to any of the gods in the Hindu pantheon, of which there are 33 million. As such, puja is performed by lay people and priests alike, and is performed in the home, in communal festivals and rituals, and in other significant locations, such as locations named in the myths and legends. The texts of the Puranas, the epics like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and historical text fall under this category of smriti, that which is remembered. This is different from shruti, that which is heard, in that these texts are usually attributed to an identifiable author, and they aren't purported to have been given to humankind by gods, and they also purport to be explicit myth histories instead of holy philosophical texts and ritual manuals. It is in these stories that we encounter the many avatars of Vishnu who come down from the realm of the gods and into the realm of humans because somebody or something has threatened the cosmic order. You'll remember that when we were talking about Agni, we said that somebody could cultivate inner latent heat from ritual propriety and meditation practice. This heat is called tapas. Well, there are stories in the Puranas of somebody cultivating such an enormous amount of tapas that they can threaten the gods themselves and upend the cosmic order. As such, Vishnu, being the preserver, has to step in and restore that order by defeating that practitioner somehow. In addition to these 3 gods and the Trimurti, there is also a god known as Devi, or Mahadevi, which just means Great Devi. Her name is just the word Deva in its female form, and as such, she represents the ideal and complete feminine principle as it's understood in Hinduism. All female goddesses in Hinduism are a manifestation of her, and they fall into 2 different categories according to their personality traits. There are the hot goddesses, or the wild goddesses, which are very warlike or very horrifying. These include Durga and Kali. Durga is a warrior goddess, and Kali is a supreme goddess of life and death. There are also the cool or tame goddesses, which are very beautiful, demure, and calm. These include Sarasvati and Lakshmi. These categories and all manifestations of Devi all constitute the various attributes of mothers, wives, daughters, and women in general, in Hinduism. Now we should talk about the Ramayana. The Ramayana is a Sanskrit epic originating in India during this Puranic period, and it's attributed to this rishi, or this master, known as Valmiki. It narrates the life of Rama, the king of the city of Ayodhya and the avatar of Vishnu. I'll be giving a very quick summary here. I'll be giving just the most basic highlights because this is a very long and complicated tale. I highly encourage anybody listening to go and read it, at least in part. The story goes that Rama was about to be crowned the king of Ayodhya, but his mother Kaikeyi decides instead to exile him and his wife Sita and his brother Lakshmana to the forest for 14 years. Rama is very calm and cool and chill with all of this, just like he's calm and cool and chill with many other things in the story, and he says he will serve out the exile to the letter. After this time, Rama and his party are traveling south along the Indian subcontinent when the sister of Ravana, the demon king of Lanka, tries to seduce Rama and Lakshmana and tries to capture and kill Sita. She fails, but Ravana sends another of his subordinates to try again, and they successfully capture Sita. Rama and Lakshmana meet Hanuman, the Monkey King, and together with him, they rescue Sita and defeat Ravana. Rama and Sita return to their kingdom as heroes, but the kingdom begins to gossip and whisper about Sita because she had spent so much time with Ravana. They start rumors that she had been unfaithful, and as such, for the preservation of the kingdom, Rama actually sends her away, and she ends up killing herself in a pyre dedicated to Agni, the fire god. This purifies her, and in some versions, she's delivered back to Rama by Agni, and Rama accepts her. In others, she stays with Agni. The importance of the story is that it sets the ideal for how every king, every husband, every man ought to behave. Throughout the entire story, Rama is mostly calm, cool, collected, and listens to those around him. He shows bravery and courage, and fulfills the duties that he has to his wife, to his kingdom, to his family, all to their fullest. Additionally, Sita is the ideal wife, princess, and queen. According to ancient Indian gender standards, a wife should be ready to kill herself in a pyre for her husband and for her kingdom, because the community suspects her of infidelity when she's been kidnapped by an evil demon king. As you can see, this text is not very feminist. This story is still famously performed and recited all over South Asia in the form of plays, puppet shows, oral storytelling, and more. We should now talk about the Mahabharata, the other major epic from this period. This text is much longer, about 4 times as long as the Ramayana, and it tells the story of the Kurukshetra War, a civil war between the Kaurava and Pandava branches of a family. We won't be able to tell the whole story today since it's so long, so I will focus on one of my favorite portions of it, the Bhagavad Gita. The Gita, as it is sometimes called, forms chapters 23 through 40 of Book 6 of the Mahabharata, which is called the Bhishma Parva. We should note that this text is centrally important to Mahatma Gandhi, who was the famous leader of the anti-colonial movement in India. The significance of the Gita is that it centers around the problem that arises when one's dharma conflicts. When we talked about dharma according to one's age and stage of life, it all seemed very straightforward. But in many cases, especially in the case of a war being fought among a single family, dharma appears less clear. The Gita tells the story of Arjuna, a Pandava prince of the Kshatriya class, as he looks across the battlefield and he sees his teachers, his cousins, and his friends. During this story, Arjuna is being asked to kill and defeat them in battle, and his charioteer Krishna, who is an avatar of Vishnu, slows time down, and they have this whole dialogue on the battlefield about what Arjuna should do. Arjuna is split between dutifully protecting his family and killing them on the battlefield, and as such, he's choosing to do nothing. Arjuna says to Krishna that he is worried that the entire structure of the universe will fall apart if he tries to kill his family members because it is such a stark violation of his duty to protect them and honor them. Krishna responds by basically saying Arjuna is being a little wimp and teaches him the 3 yogas. Now, the 3 yogas are very important in this text, and we should unpack what this word yoga means, because yoga is a very loaded and Western word nowadays, and so let's discuss that a little bit. We commonly think of yoga in the West as being body poses and breathing exercises, but this is a very Western and modern understanding of it that strips it of its ritual and religious significance. Yoga is cognate with the word to yoke, and as such, it represents meditative, ascetic, and devotional practices of many kinds. It is a path of realization and practice, of which body poses and breathing are only a small part. Not only that, as you'll see when we discuss the Gita, there are many different types of yoga for different contexts. Krishna preaches karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga to Arjuna to get him to chill out and be a warrior. Karma yoga is the yoga of action, of just doing a thing and letting go of the consequences or fruits of that action. By foregoing all attachments to outcomes, you can act freely and dutifully. Krishna argues that you cannot kill anybody in the battle, nor are you the one who kills, because the Atman is immortal. It can't be killed, nor can it be tainted through the act of killing. So Arjuna should just get on with it. This doesn't work, and so Krishna goes on to preach jnana yoga, the yoga of wisdom. The Atman is eternal and is subject to rebirth until liberation, which is the realization of the oneness between the Atman and Brahman, the individual with ultimate reality. As such, Arjuna should get going and be a warrior because everybody he is killing is already inherently one with Brahman, and as such, he can't kill them or taint his soul by killing them, or their soul by killing them in any way. This doesn't work, and so Krishna goes on to preach the yoga of bhakti, or devotion. He argues, if Arjuna shows devotion to Krishna, then Krishna will remove all karmic consequences of his actions. If Arjuna devotes all his actions in the war to Krishna, then everything will be okay. The way that this works is that Krishna identifies himself to Arjuna as both the personal God and the true ultimate reality at the same time. At the end, Arjuna is finally able to act and fulfill his duty in the war. As such, bhakti becomes a very popular means of devotion and worship of the gods because anybody can do it, even if they don't study the texts or have access to sacrifice or other complicated rituals. The Bhagavad Gita democratizes worship and subsequent moksha to people who were previously unable to acquire it. Thus, the popularity of the Gita and the Mahabharata, of which it is a part, quickly eclipsed the popularity of the Vedas due to their increased accessibility and their practice of bhakti, which became very popular even to this day. Not everybody can make the proper sacrifices at the proper sites or study the Vedas, but they can make offerings in their home, they can engage in bhakti yoga, and they can devote themselves to Vishnu or to any others of the Trimurti and achieve liberation that way. I hope that you've enjoyed part 1 of our discussion of Hinduism. We have just left the story in the Puranic period, and I hope you'll join us next time for Hinduism Part 2, where we will pick up the story with the dialogue that takes place between Buddhism and Hinduism during the life of the Buddha. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. My name is Nick Bright, scholar of East Asian religions and voice of Hearer.
And I'm Docs, editor, question asker, and voice of Hermit.
And this has meant Bright on Buddhism. Thank you for listening. If you like our podcast, or if you have a question you'd like us to discuss, we'd love to hear from you. Please consider leaving a comment or review, subscribing, or joining us on social media. Email us at bright.on.buddhism@gmail.com or find us on Mastodon at brightbuddhism@mstdn.party. As always, citations and resources for this episode can be found in the show notes. Thank you.